always a pleasure. And the same weather I'm in Hamburg, a little warmer, it's rainy, so I feel at home. And I think the first title of this my presentation was about hegemony and dominance, and then I thought I would like to switch to regional powers, but I think today we'll speak about those regional powers and hegemony. And I thought, because it's a conceptual workshop, we'll speak a lot about concepts, concept construction, construction, and not so much about particular cases. As you may know, some 4 or 5 years ago, I wrote an article about how to compare regional powers, and in the last year I didn't much work on regional powers, so it was also interesting for me to come back. And so, what will I do? On the one hand, reviewing what happened the last year, I was surprised to see that in the same year, when I published my article on how to compare regional powers, there were also published 4 other articles about the same topic. We didn't know from each other, but I think these 5 articles very good to delimit a little bit the area of regional powers and the different aspects related to different powers. And I was also surprised that afterwards, in the last years, there was not so much conceptual writing or conceptual work about regional powers, with very few exceptions, which I will mention later on. So what will I do in my presentation? I will say something a little bit why we need the concept of regional powers and why this might be important. And then I will develop the concept of regional powers. First, I will reconstruct the concept of regional powers as I did it when I first worked on this topic. So now the article is published for some years and is quoted, so afterwards I can try and deconstruct my own concept and perhaps later, just a moment. Then I will say something about the later concept of development with regard to regional powers, mention some recent research topics and research lines, and perhaps at the end we might try together perhaps to create a new concept of regional power. Okay, why it's important or why it would be interesting to have a concept of regional powers? I think it's related on the one hand to the global power shifts since 2000, and on the other hand to the discussion about the role of regions in IR. And we had Curie here on Monday, and this one who is very much highlighting the changing role of regions in international relations, some really global IR. And as you know, in the end of the 1990s, some Anti-Human Foreign Affairs published his famous article where he spoke about the multipolar 21st century. Then we had in 2003 the invention of the BRICS by Goldman and Sachs. Later, I think the constructivists are quite happy. So the concept of BRICS became a real actor. And related to the BRICS, we have also certain overlapping in the discussion and also in the conceptual development between the concept of regional power and rising powers, because normally most of the rising powers are also regional powers. So this also creates some problems for conceptual development. And as I mentioned, the role of regions, famous book by Katzenstein, the role of region 2005, and then these articles by Sharia about emerging regional architecture and world building later on also. And Hamburg was also here on One World and Many Worlds. And the last element which had an influence in this conceptual development, discussion about regional powers, was the regionalization in some region. I don't know whether Carlos Loza mentioned this in the morning. So when we try to develop the concept of regional powers, there are some conceptual challenges and problems. I would say one challenge is a very complicated concept because it combines two nouns, regions and power, which are also quite complicated. We have a lot of discussion. I think in the morning, what is a region? Is it only a social construct, or is there a region because of the interconnectedness and all these kind of things? And how to delimit the regions? Are there overlapping regions? And we know also that the power is a very complicated concept. There are soft power, power capabilities of power as the influence A over the behavior of B, and there are also structural power and discursive power. And once read an article of the 4 or 5 phases of power, there might be also 6 phases of power. And when we speak of regional powers, we combine both these very complicated concepts. On the other hand, another problem for conceptual development, but also for the later analysis of regional powers, is that we mix in a certain way, we combine different levels of analysis. We have the global level and the regional level. So a state might be, and normally the states act on both levels, on the regional level and the global level. And I tried to, this is quotation to describe this picture of different stages where the actors act and the audience also tries to influence the acting of the actors. And we have also the question whether, with regard to the power resources of power, normally we have this classification between small, middle, and secondary and great power. But middle power on the global level might be a great power at the regional level, and we have also here this conceptual mix. And as I mentioned in this quotation that you see here, that normally the actors play on these different stages. They play on the global and the regional level, and these different strategies interact with each other and create also certain problems for the analysis. When we start on series, there are also different theoretical building blocks. When we speak about regional powers, clearly realism gives a lot of information because power is a key concept of realism, and there's this famous book by Mersheimer, in line with defensive realism, where he says that each great power has to is interested that there is no competitor in its own region, and there might be a lot of conflicts. But also liberalism has something to contribute to the discussion about regional powers, about the domestic basis of regional power, and also about the role of regional cooperation, regional institutions, and last but not least also the constructivism, whether regional power is something like a role, a self-definition. I think roles theory might be there quite an interesting subfield for the construction of the concept. So later on, there are a lot of smaller conceptual building blocks for regional powers. When we speak about regional powers, there is the concept of region, as I mentioned, of regional order, regional organization might play a role, regional projects, regional security complexes, power, as I mentioned it, hegemony, dominance, willingness, roles, leaders and leadership, regional public goods, followers, and followership, and some of these concepts will reappear later in my presentation. So before I started with my own concept of regional power, I scanned a little bit of literature when I did this in 2008-9. There was not much literature, there were not many definitions of regional powers. The one that I found was this one from 92 by Eugen Osterwood, and there you see some components that will reappear also in later definitions of regional powers. The region, that the regional power should be part of a certain region, so we have problems. There might be some powers without a region. I think Mexico is the case. It certainly has power capabilities, but one has to ask what is the region for regional power. With the United States beside, and for Central America, the big hegemon in the United States is more interested in the smaller one, Mexico. Then the second category, the regional power needs capabilities that has to have real influence, and that there's also the question between the global level and the regional level that contrasting powers, the state might be also great power definition. And another definition that I found this time was this one by Max Schulman. There are some new components. We will also have to look internal dynamics, whether the state can willingness is an important concept that will relate to the capacity or ability to act, and also the acceptance by the other actors that you are in the region, but also outside of the region that you are in regional power. So before I come up with my definition, there's a good summary, I think, by Sandra Destani, who published her article in the same year, giving some hints what might be the basic components of the concept of regional powers. The state should clearly belong to some region. We should define a region, that we should have some superior power capabilities, and also some real influence in the region. So based on these different building blocks, I published this article in 2010 and tried to define regional powers. I called it in this time an analytical framework or concept. I'm not sure whether it's really an analytical concept. I think it's more an analytical framework that on the one hand includes some core criteria to identify regional powers, as well as some further analytical dimensions for the comparison of different regional powers. And then it was a definition that I developed at that moment that important is the retention or self-conception of a leading position in the region. Then the second important criteria are the power resources, material, organizational, but also ideological, and also the third category, activities that the state should have really influence within the region. And then in addition, I added some further criteria which in part are deducted from the core criteria, the interconnectedness with the region, that it has an influence in the geopolitical delimitation and the political ideological construction of the region. There isn't the spector, we really talked about how the certain Brazil has created the idea of South America that before what really existed as a region. Regional governance structures are important in influence, regional identity or regional project, that the regional power should provide collective or collective good to the public goods for the region, influence the regional security agenda, question of recognition in the region and outside of the region, and in a certain way also the representation of regional interests outside of the region. Then I was quite interested and curious whether my concept of regional powers was applied by other scholars, and I checked Google Scholar, and then I looked at the articles which country was mentioned. I didn't include in my calculation all the articles, some I saw out, but I was looking. I think it's some kind of indicator to see which powers, which countries are mentioned, and so what we think is the country most mentioned related to regional powers.
Germany?
No.
Brazil?
Brazil. Was around 30% of articles I found that quoted my article and had Brazil in it. It might be related to Google Scholar, because Google Scholar has a lot of literature in Spanish and Portuguese, so, but not in Chinese or Russian, so this might give us some bias. Then there are 3 countries mentioned more or less at the same time. Which countries do you think?
South Africa.
Yes. What more?
India.
Yes. And the third country?
Russia.
No?
Russia.
No, that was the third country was a surprise.
Nigeria.
Australia.
You don't know?
No, it is the
it's South Africa 50%, and India, Turkey. That's surprising. There's a lot of literature quite recently where the concept of regional power is also used by Turkish scholars.
No Nigeria, no Nigeria.
No, that was kind of the world, and 5% are also China, but I think this might be also representative, because normally when you speak about China, the concept of regional power, I think is small, it's a big power there. And then the rest, South Korea, Saudi Arabia, Japan, Iran, Egypt, Nigeria, and also the EU. But I think it might be also representative a little bit. But I think it might be also representative for the broader literature as far as you see. I think this concept of regional power is very much used when you analyze Brazil, also South Africa, India. Turkey is from EU, China is the big, and the rest are some smaller articles. I was surprised by Turkey. Okay, then now I demonstrated you how I constructed my concept of regional power. Now I will start with a deconstruction. Now, after 4 years, I was thinking about what is a good concept. I should have put better to read Gary Burns before I wrote my article. But so concepts are series about ontology. There are series about the fundamental constitutive elements of the phenomenon. I think the basic level announced. I think regional power. This is not so bad. I think this is the secondary level. One might discuss whether my criteria capture or are necessary. And the third level is the operational level, the indicator level, which is not in my article, but I remember I had a draft of this article for some ECR conference where I had also a catalog of indicators. Then there are, when we take Gary Burns, he says there are 2 ways for concept construction. One is the necessary and sufficient condition structures that suggest CRISP, like autonomous view of categories, that remember all or nothing. Each of these necessary and also secondary level dimension. In my paper, I think the resources and power are these secondary level dimensions, retentions or willingness. And what one might discuss is whether activity is also a necessary condition, but I will come to this back later. In a second possibility for concept construction is family resemblance, but as I didn't know, this is when a certain number of criteria should apply or not, then you are part of the family. I was more in favor of this first way of concept construction. Then thinking more about my concept, I found also some weaknesses on some problems. So what I didn't take into account when I constructed the concept is that you might be regional power by default or against your will, because you are the strongest country in the region, you are not interested in election. And on the other hand, I think my concept might be more about leadership and not about dominance. So when I wrote a German version of this article, I spoke not about regional powers, Regionalmacht, but about regionale Führungsmacht, something like regional leadership power. Then a certain problem that I found, and this is a very good quotation by this article by Sandra Mardi, I think most people who work on regional powers have some benevolence concept of regional power. This is a good guy. But we know also there are also the ugly sides of power. And I have to confess, in my article, I concentrated also more on this benevolent and leading and integrating strategies. Then, revising a little bit the literature, preparing this presentation, I found this very interesting paper by David Mitchell for the ICS-UL meeting in Buenos Aires last year. There. And nice place. And he makes also some interesting critics on my paper, and I have to admit some are right, he says, oh no, it's wrong. And to judge the relative weight of this dimension of regional powers are not really defined. That he might have a good point. Then the second critic I don't really understand, not any understanding of how this characteristic might manifest differently across states. On the third point, differentiation between established powers and more major powers, I think, for my concept was also important. And the fourth criteria might be justified that what it means that some characters are more or less applicable or not. But in the end, he says it's left for further research, perhaps for you. So I'm a little bit cleared. And after reading this critic of this basic concept, I found this other article on Korea, not normally defined as a regional power, but as you see, I will be quite short. These both authors also come back to this basic criteria of regional power, the limitation of region, potential to lead, the endowment, power capabilities, real influence, and the recognition by other actors. So what will I do next? I will, after giving this overview, how I developed my concept, what are some critical points, I will come back to these later. I will go to some conceptual developments with regard to the concept powers and some research activities. I think one line of reflection, conceptual reflection, is about the types of leadership, the type of hegemony. There's a paper of Patterson, might be in Greece, under this study, which I will mention later. Or there are also case studies or case-related concepts, as the concept and developed by C. Burgess about consensual hegemony for the case of Brazil. There's a lot of literature related to the interactions between leaders and followers, the concept of leadership and followership. Stefan Schirm wrote some paper, but also Andres Malin called a leader without follower, as fundamental, also about Brazil. And there's a lot of literature that are not only regional powers, but normally they're also secondary, the second strongest country in the region. I think originally this idea of secondary powers or second tier countries comes also from Samuel Huntington in one of his articles. Later, a lot of authors like Daniel Keynes or the Nobel work on secondary powers. There's literature on regional orders, different powers of regional orders, works on regional security convention by Wasserstein and Weber, or also by Frazier and Stuart in this which I will mention later. Then there's also literature on internationalism and governance, which I will not enter today. Then the question about regional powers, different regional global status, which I mentioned at the beginning, and also the interaction between the global and the regional level. I will come back to this later on. So let's start with leadership. So I think basically I found this nice quotation in this article, an application of the concept of regional power leadership to the European Union in the Black Sea region. And I think you have normally technically a willingness to act as a regional leader. You need the capacity to mobilize internal resources and also acceptance by other actors behind the region. And one of the articles I mentioned before is who tackles this topic of leadership is this article by Stefan Schirm on leaders and followers, emerging powers and global government. It's basically about regional powers, and this question is under which conditions do followers support emerging powers fits for leadership. And you see here this different vision that leadership is the ability to make others follow your positions, and followership is a little bit the mirror that you accept this leadership, and also indicate that you do not share previously standard set. And this hypothesis is that it's easier to lead when you include interest and ideas of your followers. I think it's obvious, and then this hypothesis is that normally inclusion of interest or ideas dominating in other countries or emerging powers leadership brings necessary condition for other countries to accept the policy position, etc. Also, that's much easier to lead or be a leader when your followers accept your policies and your positions. And then we can move over from this concept of leadership of Stefan Schirm to some authors and articles which try to construct on the basis on this leadership variable different types of regional powers, different regional leadership. And I think one of the classics and important articles when you will work on leadership, on regional hegemony, is this paper by Thomas Patterson in 2002 in the review studies on cooperative hegemony, power ideas and institution and regional integration. And I think he is one of the responsibles that we have this benign bias, because he introduced this cooperative hegemony concept in all, we prefer, I think, cooperation to conflict. And I think this was one of the reasons for the article, that this article was quite influential for later authors. And his basic argument, which is very systemized in this table, is it's clear that cooperative hegemony compared to unilateral hegemony has some advantages. You are likely to rule, you can have indirect influence, you prevent free riding because the others participate, etc. But it has also disadvantages because you have to share power, you have to make certain way proposes to regional powers to prepare the strategy of cooperative hegemony, and he developed then a very complicated model that there have to be certain preconditions. You need the power aggregation capacity, but also power sharing capacity, where internal and external factors play a role. But I will not further delve in this. But then the next author, which developed the concept of different forms of regional powers based on the strategy, was Sandra Despoir. This is an article in 2010, regional powers and the strategies, empire, hegemony and leadership. And as I mentioned at the beginning, she was one of the authors a little bit critical that normally you have this idea of benevolent leadership, and therefore she differentiates three types of leadership: unilateral strategy, some kind of imperial power, a cooperative one, which is a traditional leadership, and a hegemonic strategy, which is in between. And puts together this in this nice table, and you see there are different types of regional leadership. We have an empire, but I think today I don't see an empire. Because now with Russia, you might have another empire, but normally in Curie case there are not so many empires. And what is, I think, quite smart in here, her paper, that she splits off hegemony in different types of hegemony: hard and intermediate and soft hegemony. And as you see in a certain way, when you look at the criteria defining an intermediate case of hegemony, this is the same kind of cooperative hegemony developed also by Petters. And I think so the difference between soft and intermediate hegemony is not so great as he brings the definition, then he ends the needs, the self-representation, and also the discrepancy between self-representation and natural behavior. This is, I think, by imperial power, it's not so big, you know. And also when you have leadership, but in hegemony there might be a difference, the kind of legitimation, the possible strategies of subordinate stage, and also whether there's a change in the normative orientation of the subordinate state based on this strategy. Then the second article is quite interesting. Both authors, William Fries and Sandra Despoir, developed their concept at the same moment, and both worked on my institute, and I remember they were both very anxious. They wrote their PhD dissertation that the other would develop the same concept, but don't. This is the problem of the doctoral student, I know, but as you see, they both work at the same time on the same concept, but the results are quite different, so don't be afraid in the case that some other doctoral student is working on the same topic. What is the approach by William Fries? She develops also typology of regional powers, and with the dimension of self-perception, regional perception, exercise of power, and type of goods. And in the end, she comes up with three types of regional powers: the regional detached powers. Might be a little bit of regional power which has domestic or global priorities. Then the hegemons, then we must have some kind of project, regional extractivism, and the regional dominators. And you see here also the influence of the regional perception, the exercise of power, and the type of goods that the regional powers provide: private goods, regional public goods, or private goods. And then the next one, we work a little bit on these different types of regional power. Was this interesting paper by David Mitchell that you can download. I think it's worth reading from the last Paxo IXA meeting. He in a certain way takes up the arguments of William Fries, but develops a much more complex model. For him, there are 4 dimensions which contribute to state behavior of regional power: the self-perception against, you know this always part. What is new by Mitchell, I think it's quite interesting, is the central thing in the foreign policy of other actors in the region. This might be an indicator whether you are a regional power or not, whether you are central within the foreign policy of the states within the region. The problem might be how to measure it, but I think it's an interesting dimension, the level of hegemony and the role of competing actors. And then he comes up with 5 types of regional powers: de facto regional powers, detached regional powers, nascent regional powers, regional hegemons, and regional dominators, and he thinks there might be something like a continuum to link up this different type of regional powers. And here it's very good. You see whether you can see all the letters. This is this total typology. You have self-perception, you have the centrality of regional power in front and level hegemony. I think if the first three dimension, I think they are quite convincing. I have some problems with the first one, role of competing actors, because here he mixes domestic and international actors. I think it's the different categories are quite interesting, and also I think this idea to have a look how central the regional power is to the politics of the other countries within the region. Then, only quite briefly, there's a whole literature which I will not describe in all detail based on this regional security complex, starting with this book by Oliveira and Ferguson, Region and Powers. David Lakers work on a lot this, and one of the articles the latest article is by Frazier and Stuart Ingersoll. They later also published an article, a book in 2011-12 based on this article. And you know, within this regional security complex, it's always important whether there's only unipolar, whether there's multipolarity, and in the end up, quite briefly, end up with a very complex scheme. As you see here, what enters is the regional distribution of power, the external influence on the region, the role definition of the regional power, the orientation, the power distribution, and in the end, we also are not so much interested in the typology of regional powers, but of regional security orders, and then they differentiate in hegemonic security as very one-strand actor in the region, power restraining power, this is the balance of different actors within the region, the concept of power within the region, where several regional powers make something like a contract, security community, where there's not no idea of conflict between the states, but no real leader, and something unstructured, but only quite briefly, not to mention also this line of thinking about regional powers linked to this regional security complex literature. Then perhaps a little long time, but coming a little bit closer to the end of my presentation. One of the latest publications dealing with this topic of regional powers or rising powers, as I mentioned at the beginning, sometimes the literature is mingled about rising or regional powers. But what is quite interesting is to analyze with more detail the regional contestation of the regional power. This is a very new edited journal of international politics. Case that you are interested in, I can send you a copy.
Oh, yeah.
What's secret? So, and what is important in this line of investigation is the role or the definition of secondary powers. Normally, the definition of secondary powers defines that it's the second most powerful state in the regional hierarchies, and specifically is defined by the political material and ideological capabilities. And what is important, I think, that these secondary powers, as the regional powers, also play on different stages, on the global stage and the regional stage, and how they combine their acting and void stages has a certain influence on their choices, and also the structure of the power destruction in the region, whether there is unipolarity or multipolarity, has also an influence on the acting on these secondary powers. And when we speak of secondary powers, we can back to this topic which I mentioned, and before the interaction between regional leadership and regional followership, and the authors which work on this topic of secondary power also very much interested. What are the conditions for leadership acceptance by the secondary players? And I think in this introductory article by Daniel Clemens and Modell in this paper, the very good differentiation that the secondary players accept some payment for the cost of regional operations, so the construction of the operating partnership for regional institutions, or the regional power should construct this institution and involve in a certain way the secondary players, the payment of the economic costs, and also the provision of public goods like regional stability and infrastructure by the regional power. And in the end, the strategic choices of the secondary powers will be influenced whether the regional powers provides these goods or not, so they might react differently. And one quite impressive article is in this edited volume is this article by Stephen Rodell, Neil Jesse, and Christine William. They also published on the same topic, I think it was 1 or 2 years before, on the secondary states and how they follow, or what are the different patterns of followership with regard to the leading powers. And their basic question is when and why do secondary and tertiary states select to support, follow, or challenge the regional rising states. And coming back what I said at the beginning, like regional powers, also secondary powers play on different levels, on the global and on the regional level, and it depends very much how these different levels interact, and they identify 3 variables which might influence the acting of the secondary powers. One is how the role of the global hegemon, how much interest he has in the region, then the power distribution within the region, how many rising states, and also whether these rising states are waxing and waning, these regional powers are waxing and waning, and then they differentiate 3 strategies for secondary powers: accommodation, persistence, and neutrality. And their basic hypothesis is it's clear when there's a high hegemonic engagement, what seems to be quite logic, then the secondary powers have no possibility to act, and there's no possibility to counterbalance against the rising power. And when it's less engaged, then their room of maneuver is more restricted. Then I think it's also important whether there's a bipolar or a multipolar regional distribution. When there's multipolarity, there's also more options for the secondary state for the strategies. And the last point is whether the hegemon and the BRIC states are waxing or waning. Clearly, when they are waning, there's more possibly. So it's not so surprising, but they tried to summarize it. So then I will come to the end. I constructed regional powers, and then I tried to deconstruct regional powers. And when I sat down last Sunday, I was thinking about this. I had in the end try to reconstruct regional powers, and after rereading so many things, I was thinking about what are the basic criteria to define a regional power, and what are the basic criteria to differentiate between regional powers. And in the end, I discuss about this later on. I thought that I think it's basically 2 criteria. I think it's about capabilities, and it's about the will to exercise this capability. Our capabilities, the definition is still not so against the barrier. I would say regional power is a state with strong power capabilities, soft and hard power compared to other states in the region, and the will to exercise this power within the regional framework. And I think we would say the combination of will and power define in the end also the strategic options for regional powers and types of regional powers. And then borrowing from all the authors I read before, I tried to develop a new concept. So I made this matrix based on the willingness and the power distribution, and I differentiated between strong, medium, and weak willingness, and strong, medium, and weak power. And then I arrived at this scheme. I would say it's clear when you're quite powerful and you have all the will to exercise the power, which is clearly a hegemonic regional power. When you have medium power but a strong willingness, I think this might be this Overarching regional power of Patterson or some of the authors. And when you have a strong willingness but you don't have power, you might be an aspiring regional power. Let's hope that in the future you might have more power resources, you have the will to then when you want strong power, but only medium willingness, this might be what we might call detached regional power. You have power to deal with power, but you're not rather interested in global stage or the domestic stage. And when you have medium power and medium willingness, this might be this consensual power of purchase for Brazil. You're not so strong related to the other actors in the region, and sometimes you like to leave. So this might be consensual regional power and then you have a weak power, but medium willingness. This might be called perhaps a nascent regional power. You might call still not clear. The last category is when you have strong power but weak willingness. You are still a regional power, but a de facto regional power without exercising it, because the other actors in their strategies take into account that you have these power resources. But when you have a medium willingness and weak, medium power and weak willingness, you might be a potential regional power, but for the moment you don't realize the potential, and it's clear when you have weak power resources. It's kind of the non-category when you have weak power resources and not interested in regional power, it's non-power. So this was a little bit at the end, after reading all this stuff, preparing your presentation, trying to construct a new typology of regional powers, and I think some real regional powers and some would-be regional powers.
Thank you very much. We'll open up for questions. Professor Detlef, do you prefer 3 questions, cluster questions, or 1 question per one?
Depends on the context.
On the complexity of the question.
Thank you so much for your presentation. My question is about what do you think the degree, the acceptance by the developed powers, which is also a contested concept, in which way they acknowledging that the emerging powers are, in fact, regional power or emerging powers, can help them to achieve that status. But I mean, when you see the African continent,
yes,
in your research in Google Scholar, there was South Africa, Egypt, and also Nigeria.
Yes.
But South Africa is in the G5. South Africa is in the G20. But it's not consensus. Even in the African continent, it is regional power. So, in which way the developed powers acknowledging that these ones are regional powers can be also explanatory to it?
Yeah.
What I read about regional powers, also empirical case, and about concept, I think in the end I saw this category, the acceptance by the great powers or by peers, by other so-called regional powers, would be an important factor to be a regional power. But in the end, for the regional power, for the power within the region, I think it's not an important category. I think it's more important for your role at the global stage, when you're accepted as one, as a representative of the region without being really accepted in the region. You still are accepted by the other actors. I think more about when I speak about these levels, the region and the global level, it's more important, I think, for your playing or your strategy at the global level than on the region level.
Thank you a lot for the presentation. I have 2 questions. The one is about the power conception in different fields of policy fields. So how comprehensive has the power to be? Because we have, if you look at security issues or economic issues, or even we talk about climate change, so I think that states can be a power in very different policy fields, and how can this be put into the framework of regional powers? And the other one is how to combine the regional power approaches or typologies with regional institutions. What's the role of this regional institution? Because it differs a lot in between the regions. Some regional powers have more success in type of institutions than others who are very much struggling by
Can I just piggyback on that? Because I'm sorry, I'm the one who knows voice. Your typologies, would you mind going back to that? I mean, they're very clever. I think it's very interesting to see. And One is linked to what Martin's first point was, and how could you typologize powers if they are maybe willing to cooperate in climate change, but not so willing to cooperate in any other area? So where would they, like Brazil, would that be a different category of willing, or you see what I mean? Thematically, would you put them for willingness in a different category? And also, who decides if the country is willing? Are you looking at their own self-perception, or are you looking at the external perception of, willingness?
Complicated question. I think start with the last one. I think this is an analytical concept, and I think in some ways it's research defines where the country is based on the literature, where you take into account self-perception, but also I think the perception of the others. What I think is a real problem is the different power dimensions, but also the different willingness dimensions. And I think when you work with this kind of typology, one option is that you can develop different typologies with different dimensions, or you have something like the average, so some kind of summing up or accumulate and say, okay, this country is basically a consensus power, but in some areas it's more going in the direction of this kind of power. At the moment, I don't see another option where you are working with different categories, different areas, powers, because also have to study down this kind of scheme where you always have cases that will not fit 100% in one part of your matrix. No?
Okay. Thank you very much. Two questions. The first one is, if in your whole review of the literature, how do you, what did you find in relation to how the regional, the idea of the concept of regional power has been influenced or transformed by increasing density of global value added chains in economic globalization? Okay? Because this is something that is a very, very relevant issue of present world. I mean, somehow erode the importance of regions. Okay, this is something that, but I am not an expert in regions. Okay, so this would be the first question. Second question is related to the fact that you quoted Brazil always 2 or 3 times. And one thing that amazed to me in the case of Brazil, but probably applied to a lot of other regional, so-called regional powers, is how they assess the capabilities. Okay? For example, one major issue in Brazil power, as regional power, is the assessing of capabilities. And there is always an inflation or overestimation of the capabilities of Brazil. One major issue of the capabilities is related to what would be the fiscal surplus for leading the region, for exercising power. Something that Brazil didn't have most of the history, have some in the second half of the past decade, and again, that's happening. And so, but there is always an idea of that the capabilities, that is the large economy for sure. So a lot of people, from this point of view, is relevant. But this doesn't. It always should be compared with domestic politics, with demands in the domestic society, in terms of where do you use your resources for your surplus, for the region or for domestic competing so demands. So this would be the second question. This is related, in my view, there is a clear overestimation and inflation of the capabilities of Brazil for being a regional power. But my question is this something that you find in other countries, examples, or even if you agree with my criticisms of the way Brazilian capabilities are assessed? Thank you very much.
I think you know what specifically Brazil, and I think also this last paper by Andreas with my ex-colleague, where we try to measure the economic power capability, the interconnectedness in the region. I think in general, the literature, as far as I know, the literature, there is this overestimation of the capabilities of Brazil. I think you might find something similar when you make analysis of South Africa, and I think it's, with the exception of China, but China is not really, there's a question whether the category of regional power is the right category for China. You have the same problem, I think, nearly in all regions. With all these regional powers. I think one problem is when I started to work on this concept of regional power at the beginning, I also thought we should include a lot of different categories of domestic power bases, whether it's supported by domestic actors, and in the end you will end up with a very complicated concept of regional power. So after studying again, thinking about regional powers, reading again what I read in the past, what other authors read, and also what a good analytical concept should, how a good analytical concept should be constructed. I'm now very much in favor of this quite lean systematization to concentrate on two dimensions. The willingness, I think this is an important variable, whether you really have an interest to lead, and I think Brazil has an interest to lead, how much, and whether there are also other interests to play a role on the global stage, but I think there's clearly willingness to lead the region. I would not say that it's a strong willingness, it's more a medium willingness. With a strong willingness would put more efforts in this initiative, and also power. And I think this is what we say. I think with economic power, military power. I think in the case of Brazil, it's quite clear. Power category, whether you take its military power or whether you take economic power, at best it's a medium category. So it will never be a strong category with regard to the region. All this topic of regional value chains, I think normally there are many also which tackle this topic when they do research on regional power. All of my colleagues, Robert Couple, did some economic models. What is the participation of the regional powers and the regional GDP in regional trade? But for me, the results have not been so convincing, and I think for the moment I have not seen an article linking this economic dimension to this more political IR dimension of regional power. It might be an interesting field for future doctoral students.
I think maybe the last point actually links a little bit to the questions that I had. But if I can be a bit cheeky enough, what is the state of the field? Where is it going? I mean, I think it seems to be one of the interesting things in terms of looking and studying about regional powers is that we no longer talk about who's at the top, but who are these recognition groups, who gives or ascribes legitimacy and recognition, and talking about contestation and resistance rather than simple acceptance. But also I was struck when you were going through the different articles. There's a lot of different typologies and often overlapping. And so I guess I just wondered, where is the state of the field on regional power studies going, and what perhaps you might be able to comment in terms of, I guess, what you were trying to say earlier, what is missing and what still needs to be done.
This is what I tried to do a little bit. I didn't include not all the recent research. There's also a lot of literature which I didn't include on how these regional powers act on the global stage, the relation between regional powers and regional order. There are a lot of literature. This is one of the areas. There you have this mix-up of the categories of rising power, of regional power. Rising power is, I think, more a concept related to the global order, and regional power to the regional order, but I think in the end these are mostly the same countries and the same actors. I think this is another field which I didn't mention. There's a lot of literature on the strategy of these regional or rising powers with regard of the future global order, whether they are drivers or spoilers of the reform of the global order. This is one interaction between the regional leaders and the second-tier states, or also the third-tier states. This is a very interesting field, this last number, which I mentioned, of international politics, which is focused on this issue. And also I think there's still a lot of research to be done on the relationship between, this links to the presentation this morning by Carlos Glosser, the relationship between regional organization, regional orders, and regional powers, which is the influence of regional orders. Then also the interaction, which is a research field which will start to do more in my institute in the future. The interaction between global orders and regional orders, and the role of regional powers and second-tier powers in this complex interaction. So in general, I think there's still a lot of research to be done. So in case that you are interested in one of the topics, don't be afraid. And you're also right. There are a lot of different concepts, categories, schemes, and what I tried a little bit. I'm now going back to this topic of regional power. Perhaps I will try, in case that I have some time, to write some articles, something like regional power solicitors, to see a little bit what had happened in the last years. First, what I tried in the first step now in this presentation, to systematize a little bit more research on regional powers. And when you look at this matrix, there I tried also to borrow from the authors that I mentioned before. It's also a little bit trying to bring the different strands and literatures together.
Thank you, Detlef. Thank you, Detlef. I love this, and I love this take. I have nothing to object to what you said, so I will object what you didn't. But the thing is that this is beautiful, but you focus almost exclusively on powers, and almost nothing on regions. So my question is whether these 4 dimensions, 4 and 3, that I will mention now, may be relevant to understanding how regional power behaves. What are the limits and possibilities for regional power? And the first one is structure. Is it the same for regional power to be in a unipolar, bipolar, or multipolar region? Is it the same to be Brazil with nobody around, or to be Germany? The second dimension is nature. Is it the same to be a power in a Westphalian region, or to be a power in a community security, or in a zone of peace, for example? The third dimension is the limits. Is it the same to be a regional power in a self-contained region as Europe, or in a region which is wide open like Latin America, open to foreign powers like the US and China? Very much so. And the fourth one, very geopolitical dimension, is terrain. Is it the same to be a regional power with contiguous links, contiguous borders, land borders with other powers, with secondary powers, or to be an island? Because I would say there is not necessarily anything idiosyncratic in Britishness, because there is some islandness. It's different to be Britain because you are not exposed to invasion, for example, as frequently as others. It's different to be in Indonesia than to be in Brazil. So does this make any sense for you? Can we have something like these dimensions in typology?
Good questions. I'm also happy to have this simple conversation. No, that's always about, and then you include more aspects, more dimensions, your concept become more fuzzy, more complicated. But I think some of your topics might be included in this scheme, because the power distribution in the region, I think when I speak about strong or weak power, it's relative power. So I think this is not complicated. When there are 2 or 3 strong players, the relative power in the region, then you might not be in the strong power categories, but in the medium power. It's the easiest thing. What was the other thing? Whether you have limits, whether you are an island or a country, you have to think about it. And then the third one was generally, I think what I did not include, but what is sometimes the problem of these schemes, that you mix up regional power, or detached regional power, or consensual regional power still gives you different strategic options. I think normally in other schemes, these strategic options which you have when you fit in one of these parts of the matrix are included in the matrix. It makes it more complicated. So as a hegemonic power or cooperative power, you can act with regard to different strategies. I think when you go to strategies, you might need more variables to explain the strategies. Might be perhaps one possibility to include some of your critics. But about some question I have specific a little bit also whether it's a security community or not. But next time I will try to include some of these ideas, but I fear that some of your topics might not fit in this typology.
Thank you.
Okay, first, I would be happy, and I think some of my PhD students would be happy to get this PowerPoint. I mean, this is an encyclopedia. I mean, the literature review. I have a PhD student who's working on this issue of regional security governance and regional power. So I don't know whether everybody's getting. I mean, I would also be glad to get this because this is very useful. The question, as you say, is, I mean, this is basically a taxonomy or a literature review. Okay, so second point, you have one hypothesis in your presentation, and it was not completely clear to me. I don't know why you want to return to the hypothesis, because you have an hypothesis in your presentation, and I think, and this is related, and Andres is modest, so we could mention his work, because another element that might be missing is that you talk about capabilities and willingness, but how about the others relating to? I mean, and your article is that you know, at Débora, everybody quotes this article about a leader without followers, right? Brazil is that Brazil might not have the willingness to provide the public good, but it's also a problem, and maybe it's because the two of us we are Argentines, that they don't like Brazil completely, and so there's a problem of accepting the leadership, which is, I think, the point about, I think Eichenberry and Tapshan wrote a long time ago about the authority, and it's somehow related to your hypothesis, but again, it's not completely clear that to be a regional power, if I understood your hypothesis, you said the regional power has to incorporate the interests and ideas of the others into itself, I mean, to socialize. Maybe you can elaborate on that, because that's an argument, right? That's an argument. But it's, again, it adds to the puzzle. It's not just willingness and capabilities, it's also, and it's always the argument about the US hegemony, that others are ready to accept that hegemony. Right? And that's another point that relates to some of the issues that Andres raised. Then, what I learned, and this was a question I asked myself, but it's in the table, that not every regional power has to be a regional hegemony. Those are two different things. How about another concept? We are playing concepts in this workshop. Pivot or pivot, I don't know how you spell that. Pivot or pivot states, right? Pivot, I think that's the pivot or pivot, not the British. Pivot? Okay? Is that the same thing? Okay, it's pivot states, how does that relate to that? Okay? That's it. Thanks.
I was thinking about this with the follow problem or the following question. I think when you take this scheme here, I think the topic of followership has not the same importance for all these types of regional power. I think when you really have hegemonic regional power, it might be better that you have this relation with followers, but in the end it can also be a hard-tag hegemon, and then it makes you, what Patterson said, to be a benevolent and hegemon makes life easier, but in some aspects more complicated. But when you detach regional power or de facto regional power, the followership problem is not a real problem for you. I think it's a problem when you have cooperative regional power and a consensual regional power. And for these categories, I think the followership is interesting. And when we speak about cooperative or consensual regional power, we have to speak about followership. I think for other categories of regional power, it might be not so important, I think. So I think we can combine it. This is the first category. And then when we take a closer look at different types of regional powers, we should also include the dimension like how you convince your followers to follow you. But when you detach, it might not be so important whether your followers follow or not.
Can you explain the hypothesis again? I mean, I don't know. I mean, because you have a hypothesis there, right?
It's not a hypothesis, I think it's in the end.
It's your hypothesis, it's not from somebody else.
What's this one?
Right.
No, I think the idea after reading all this thing, when I see all this whole bunch of different schemes and tables, and I was thinking about, and I think when you create an analytical concept, it should be prosymmetrous, it should be clear, simple, and I think that I was thinking about what are the basic categories, and after when in the beginning I presented my first definition or concept of a regional power, and it was very quite complex. I included all what was in the books in all these moments. But looking back now, perhaps it was too much. So perhaps it might be better to have only two categories and receive the criticism you missed this thing and that thing. But you can, in the end, you can have both things.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for the words. Firstly, excuse me if I didn't understand clearly your presentation, but anyway, I would like to hear your opinion on this matter. So, in your definition, you define regional power as a state who has a willingness to exercise the power in a certain region and strong capabilities. And in that particular dimension, you only mention the hard and soft power. But I question, what about smart power? What about the emphasis, the crucial emphasis on the context? I mean, globally and regionally. Don't you think that importance and that emphasis on the context is what distinguish a global from a regional power? Also, if you may, I would like to ask you another thing. In terms of security and strategic options, what really defines a regional power, in your opinion? I mean, considering all the literature you read, because it seems that if you may, your definition is quite it combines a multiple of concepts, but those concepts are not particularly clear. You know what I mean? But nevertheless, I suppose your argument was quite interesting and engaging indeed. But yeah, I would like to hear your opinion on that. Thank you.
I think also that the first question that I only mentioned now hard and soft power. On smart power, I think as I understand, I think for combination, the right mix of hard and soft power is smart power. So I think smart power would be in. I think that there's no problem to include all kinds of power categories. But the second question is about security or military power or the hard power capabilities. What's right? How to measure this? The second question was related how to measure hard power.
Exactly, I'm talking about specifically subjective options. What do you particularly mean by that? Could you please clarify? And sorry.
I think the distinction between regional and global power in terms of security, also this issue of context, global context, regional.
I suppose, sorry, in my opinion, as I previously said, one of the main characteristics that really distinguish the global from a regional power is that emphasis on context, that careful attention on the social background, and regardless you agree or not with the concept of smart power, I suppose the definition quite misses that part. No. Yeah. I don't think I'm being completely clear.
If I may jump in, correct me if I'm wrong, I think her understanding of global power is exactly this ability of state to mix both soft and hard power, and that's basically the crucial asset that a state must have in order to, to upgrade the global power, if that's what you meant.
Yes, but the global power, in my perspective, has not only that two dimensions, but also takes into account the global context and the regional. And in your definition, you only mention two crucial dimensions, which is soft and hard power.
So it's, in a way, it's a bit what Andreas was also saying. The context, the regional context. Is it an island or a continent?
Yes, these aspects also, as we talk here. Sorry.
No, I think it's funny.
This is not a critic, just to stimulate the conversation.
As I mentioned right at the beginning, when I started also working on this concept of regional powers, I read a lot on power. As I mentioned at the beginning, when you start reading about power, perhaps you never end up reading, because we have two different power concepts and dimensions of power, but on the other hand, when you try to construct some kind of typology, in the end you have to restrict all this huge bulk of information that is there. I think when you make an empirical analysis, you should broaden up your power concept for the empirical analysis. The different levels of power, economic power, different levels of power, also power that you exercise via structures, where you create regional organization in a certain way. It would also be a power instrument, but unfortunately, when you try to construct simple concepts, sometimes you have to leave out a lot of the complexity that is there. But I think that when you do an empirical analysis, you should also work with a much more complex power concept.
Thank you very much.
Yes, and I think that the other problem is that power is always relative. You might be important. You might have a lot of power in your region and in different dimensions, but when you go on the global stage, your power might be not the same, and so the interaction also between these different stages will go into the analysis.
Thank you. As you know, I'm kind of ignorant of this specific field of journalism, but I found it quite useful what you have presented to illustrate on the concept. I was trying to do it before, and just to understand myself and say, I would like to raise you the following question, which is, this typology is basically a classification, right? Classification and heuristic proposal or epistemological proposal, which is to compare phenomena which are considered solid, right? So here we have a typology that has got 9 cases. I would say 8 because the non-power is a residual one. It's not a category really, because regional power by definition are powers, non-powers. So the question is, you said in the presentation there is a huge disagreement about the definition, not of the types, but of the regional powers. And you mentioned a number of cases which I don't think they get up to 18 cases. Now the question is, in the absence of a consensus of what a regional power is, how you can assign values, critical values to each of the cases, and how many cases you really need to make those categories meaningful in terms of comparison, because if it's all we have only agreement that Brazil to say it's a regional power, and then it goes to the regional power category, all the rest of it is useless, apart from the very elegant exercise of logical construction. Accepting that then the opposite, you can really classify a number of power that make sense to these categories, 8 categories. The question is a preliminary one, which I think was implicit in part of your presentation, in some of the presentation and some of the responses, which is specifically how you measure. How you measure power and how you measure awareness along a discrete sequence of the strong, medium, and weak that is meaningful. How to do that? That's a real challenge, and particularly in terms of willingness. Let me put you a very stupid example. If we were going to make the same kind of classification of regional football powers, the category willingness would be equal for everyone if you were to consider their willingness to become world champions. So probably there is something different there that we don't capture with this kind of expression. I'm not trying to make fun of this, but I'm trying to say that these categories perhaps are not precisely defined and they can be operationalized. And this is essentially what we are doing empirical research, and most of the time students follow this kind of heuristic construction that have to be translated afterwards to the ground. And this is very difficult, so to say, right?
Carlos, Andres was asking me where you would put a country like Israel, okay, I come from there. And it's interesting because Israel has no willingness at all to play in the region, right? So it's a weak, so it would be weak willingness, and power might be medium, so it might be a potential at most.
That's not true. That's not true. It depends how you define willingness. Everything depends on the definition. So it's not so clear that Israel is not, is or is not. It depends how you define it. And that's the problem. Again, we have with the problem of definition. You define willingness as the attitude to intervene in your environment, right? Israel has got willingness. If you define willingness as, trying to convince the others that you are very nice, Israel hasn't got willingness, but it's a problem of definition. At the end, it's a problem of definition. And that's the problem with the you can't get it. But you have to start saying it empirically. That's not so easy.
Right.
I think Israel for me would be clearly a de facto regional power. I think with regard to the powers of the strongest state in the region, and I think the idea is lead region. I think nobody has the idea to lead this complicated region, but the other actors take into account that there is I think it's a clear case for me of a de facto regional power. But coming back to Carlos, I think it's really, I'm not sure whether we will find enough cases for all these different parts of my manifesto. I think perhaps for Nastin and Spring Initial Powers like the football clubs, there might be some cases that we could put in. But I think we are still much better off than comparing regional integration, where we have only one case, the EU, and we have no case to compare. So comparing regional powers is still much better than this one. With regard how to measurement, I think in the end, in the case that I would do a comparative study, I would in this case I would base my study on the existing secondary literature, whether the author, which are specialists on religious, see some willingness to lead. I think it's left in the end it's some willingness to lead to leadership.
But you realize that you could find a kind of conceptual problem that Ari was precisely on the table. That conceptual literature can consider Israel a regional power, another set of the literature can consider Israel, because the reason that Ari was saying is not a regional power. So you are relying on very weak measurement for that, which is consensual conceptual agreement.
No, I think the next step would be when in the case that I would be convinced of my new invention. The next step would be to, for the different categories, to put and then the next step in the categorization, clear indicators, operationalization, but this would be the next step. But I think there's really, I think when you study regional powers in our world, there will be so many regional powers. So I think for really comparative analysis, there will be also, always have certain problems, more areas than cases. But think about comparative regionalism. Comparative integration. It's much more complicated.
Okay, we have time for one last question, and this one.
Yes, I think coming to the discussion, as I said in the comments from you as well as acceptance, I think the next step is especially not what's willingness, what's power, but what's strong power. So you need, I would say, you need acceptance to follow us to be a strong power. How could you use strong power without acceptance? It's like, what is power?
Would you deny that the United States is a strong power?
No, the question is...
Has it got a system in the Middle East?
That's exactly the point. The question is how do you define power? Is power capabilities? Is power tanks? Is power economy?
But it's not authority, it's power, it's a different thing.
So the question is how to
Right,
define
it's
this
power.
difference. So when I make a concept, I say I want to put a state in one of the categories. I first have to say what do I mean with strong power. Strong power I would mean, personally, acceptance is the thing. You cannot accept it. So it depends on how you make it. And that's the next thing. And the willingness as well. What is willingness? Is willingness maybe ableness as well? Like you don't have to do it, but you create a system where you could do it. And so you have the political willingness to be able to be a strong.
You see how you have resolved the problem, which is a very logical way of resolving, which is adopting your own definition. So which is fair. It is fair, but that creates a kind of problem precisely that Detlef was trying to overcome, the lack of consensus.
Right.
You say, for me, power is specifically this, okay.
But that's hard power. That's hard power.
It's the same meaning of power you're going to find in also calling for a more constructive approach or for a more realistic approach.
So I think this is logically the next step when you take this new scheme or new typology for an article comparing different, you have to put in the definition. This article I define power, strong, medium, weak power as such, and I define willingness. And then when you read the article, you can accept my definition or not.
But Detlef, we can ask you what you mean, because here you have it's like, look, it's 3 dimensions of power. What do you mean here? I think you mean here hard power, right?
Yes,
you don't mean here soft power.
Hard power. And I would include economic power as a
but that's hard power
too, yes.
Yeah, it is.
Similar to hard power.
Then it goes in a different area.
Yes, it's different from what
saying
you
strong
said.
or hard.
Right.
Saying strong or hard.
Every theory has a problem. When you want to make two concepts, in the end, every theory has that problem of constructing the concept. You know, if you look at the section of, the definition of sensori, you have to make, you have to construct them in a certain degree for, in order to not to fall in that era of conceptual stretching. So yeah, certain points. This is a basic question in political science.
Always when you construct or when you define and develop a concept, I think you have to look whether this is a concept you can analyze, compare, and there might be better concepts. So I think I'm not sure whether this is the right way. Try to follow this way, but there might be also better concepts. But that's fine. We always discuss about different categories. And I think when you speak about two powers, I think in the end, hard power, call it military or also economic power, is a very important criteria. You can have a lot of soft power, but I don't think with soft power you will ever become only with soft power you will only ever become a real regional power. It might help you.
Thanks very much, Detlef. I think this month